Can you believe this is 40 years old already? Some of you probably aren't wondering that and are probably wondering, what is this? Well, this is a Japanese NES, or Nintendo Entertainment System. Except, that's not what it's called over there. In Japan, it was called the Family Computer, or Famicom. And yes, these are two completely different things in terms of how they look. But trust me, they're the same thing. They have similar hardware, same games, same controllers and design. They're the same console, but they just look different. The Famicom came out in 1983 compared to the NES that came out in 1985, which there's a couple reasons why they came out at such a different time, different year, and also look differently. And that's because the American NES was designed to not look like a video game console and more like a toy, as video game consoles weren't well received at that time due to consoles like Atari having a lot of low quality games and such back in 1983 and before, causing a video game market crash. So due to that, Nintendo didn't release this thing at first and decided to redesign the entire thing to look completely different and look more akin to a toy, even releasing it with a toy add-on called Rob the Robot. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons why these consoles look so different to one another. But like I said, they're practically the same thing at the end of the day. So what came in the box for the Famicom? There's not a lot going on. There's like basically 3 pieces. I mean, there's a manual underneath the console, but you basically have like 3 items, which one of them was of course the AC adapter, which this thing is heavy. I have no idea why it's so heavy, but this thing has a bit of weight to it. This is an RF switch, which is used to display the console to the TV. And this, I guess, was one of the few ways you could get it connected to a TV. I guess if you didn't have an RF plug-in or an antenna plug-in, which is that thing that you use to screw cables in, you could just plug this instead into it. But I guess for TVs that didn't have that, you'd have to do a few extra steps, and I guess this kind of gives you a guide on how to do that. I probably am never going to have to do this for a TV because that's probably for really old TVs, but I mostly just plug it in using this instead. I do not want to go into learning how this works. And then of course we have the console itself. So as you can see, the controllers are on the sides of the console, and there's a reason to that. They are plugged into the console itself, so you can't just simply unplug it as you would with an NES. Rather, you would have to unscrew the whole thing and take it out, which is not the most convenient thing, but I'm guessing there wasn't much of a reason why you would have to do that. One of the few noticeable differences you may see is that, one, there is an eject slider, which is something similar that you see in the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, but rather than pressing it down like a button, you would slide it to lift the cartridge up. And then of course you have your lid for when you're done playing with it. One interesting thing you may notice is that this console has an extra plug-in, and that's where you would plug in extra stuff. You know, just kind of extra controllers that you wouldn't have been able to plug in because these 2 controllers can't just be unplugged as easily as you would with an NES. So anything that required to be plugged into the console to work would usually just go into this 15-pin port. This is what it's called. I think that's 15 pins. And much like how the console is designed differently, so are the cartridges. Unlike NES cartridges that usually were just gray cartridges, and they were really huge and tall. Actually, let me get one out just to show you. They usually looked like this in terms of design, and these things are massive. Instead of it being like that, they would come in multiple different colors, and they were usually pretty small. I know there's some Famicom cartridges that are a little bigger, but I don't think all of them, or a lot of them, were designed to be that big. Basically, this was kind of the average size of a Famicom cartridge. These are some that I have right now at the moment, but they definitely look much more interesting personally. I like these more than the NES cartridges because, I don't know, well, first off, they're nice and small, they aren't like these huge things. But also, I just kind of like the fact that every cartridge is designed a little differently in terms of like having a different color, sometimes having a different design, or sometimes having kind of a different layout. It makes it kind of interesting to me. Oh, and I almost forgot, there's these two things that came with it. So first off is the Famicom manual, which is basically just a guide on how to plug it up. This is, it's kind of hard to show you since I'm behind the camera, but as you can see, it's just kind of a guide to show you how to get it all plugged up. I can't read Japanese, so I can't really tell you what it says, but it has pictures, so it might be easy. And then there's like an advertisement or something for the Family Basic, which is kind of like which is actually, this is the perfect time to tell you right now, was one of the add-ons you could use to plug into the front of the Famicom using that 15-pin port. I don't have this, and I don't think I would be able to use it even if I did, as it was just basically an add-on to program your own stuff into it. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to see what the Famicom got that the NES didn't end up getting. So yeah, that's basically the Famicom in all its glory. Like I said, I prefer this design a little better over the American version. I think it just looks cooler, in my opinion. just started collecting games for this console recently, and I hope to find lots of interesting ones in the future. Games that never released out of Japan, or have regional differences, or even push the consoles past its limit. I also hope to make more videos relating to this console because, well, it's just such a neat thing to me. Okay, before I finish this video, I do need to point out one pet peeve of mine about this console. Why can't it run floppy disks right out of the box? I need to buy an add-on just to play this? I just bought this thing, now I have to buy another thing? Come on, Nintendo, why do you have to make everything so complicated? 0 out of 10. Can't run my floppies.